I'm Christine Merle from the Children's Institute, and I'm back with the Digging Deeper module on family engagement. As with all the other modules, please look for a little light bulb whenever there's a break for an activity, and I hope you're ready to focus on one area that usually we don't think about right at the forefront, and that is our families. So there is one thing we know for sure about families. They are the best resource we have about the kids that are sitting in front of us in any way. They know their likes, they know their dislikes, they know what they like to play with, what they don't like to play with, their personalities, their temperaments. They are such a great resource for us. Along with that, there are some challenges also that some of these familiar relationships present for us in the classroom. I am going to ask you to keep in mind the pressures that are facing many of our families right now. There are financial pressures, social pressures, changes in the structures of their families. So many of our families are looking at different socioeconomic structures, two parents working outside the home, different time schedules than their children. And then we add in all the different scheduling challenges of our students and their academics and their extracurriculars and their daycare schedules. And it really looks like our families are carrying so much more than they ever have before. Consequently, it may sometimes look as if our families are less engaged compared to how they looked 5, 10, 15 years ago. But keep in mind all of those reasons that may keep them less engaged, or that it just looks different than it looked 5 years ago. We're not sure of what kind of engagement they're actually having with their students at home on different schedules than what we're used to, but it doesn't mean they're less engaged. So you know we're going to start off with an icebreaker and a little bit of a get-to-know-you activity. And as we're talking about families, this activity is actually called Birthright. So what I'm going to need you to do is identify yourself as either the youngest in your family, the oldest in your family, the middle child, or an only child. Once you've split your group up into these 4 different sections, your job is to come up with a list of the pros and the cons of being that birth order in your family. Your facilitator will help guide you through reporting out on some of those pros and cons. Keep in mind that those little bodies in front of you all represent the oldest, the youngest, the middle, and the only child as well. And they are facing some of those similar pros and cons. Have fun with this activity, and I'll see you when you're done. Welcome back. I hope you had fun with that activity. As the baby of my own family, I know there were definite pros to being in that position, and I'm wondering if your conversations sounded similar. Today, as we look at family engagement, let's take a look at our objectives. We're really looking at those factors that help increase family engagement, both as a community and as one-on-one with that teacher-parent relationship. We're looking at the idea of strategies that can help you increase the level of family engagement that you have at your school. And you really should build some time in for some good conversations and some planning. And to spend some time really reflecting on what you may have done in the past that needs to be tweaked a little to make it more successful, and to make some plans for the future and how to increase the amount of families and caregivers that you have attending your events and being part of your community. So we'll start off with a little bit of a giggle. So we're going to take a look at a video from Gary Brooks, yet again, on Parent Online University. Keep in mind it is very tongue-in-cheek and not meant to be literal, but it will get us in possibly that frame of mind that we want, with some laughter as we start this journey together. So in order to start looking at family engagement, I need you to do a little reflection. So your groups are going to be split up to head out to some chart paper, and we're going to talk about the best of times and worst of times. Actually, I really want you to take a look at the strengths that our families bring to your organization and some of the challenges that also go along with that. So there should be 2 sides. Take some time to brainstorm. Your facilitator will guide you through this. Sometimes when I ask you to do an activity like that has those 2 positives, negatives, strengths, weaknesses, challenges, all of those kind of words, one of the things I really want you to be able to do is take a look at some of those challenges and put an X through them, because so many of them are not within our control. Like every piece of social emotional learning that we deliver, we really want to come from an asset-based lens. So I'd really like you to focus on the strength side of your board. We can't control so many of those negatives, things like parents not showing up as much as we want. Some parents may be volunteering too much to be in the classroom so that they can have a say in what's going on. Instead, set those to the side and really look at the strengths of your families. Do you have families that are truly committed? Do you have families that want to be committed and can communicate to you by email or phone because they can't be there in person? But at least they're keeping that line of communication open with you. Let's really look at our planning in terms of our strengths and building upon them, just as we would with our students. So what are the factors that really can impact our family engagement then? The first one is that building of trusting relationships and what that looks like in your school as well as in your classrooms. When I think of what's necessary for a really good trusting relationship, the first thing I'm going to say to you is that it has to be two-way communication with active listening. So when you do hear from that parent that's reaching out about something that happened in your classroom, are you actively listening? Are you ready to be on the defense right away? Or are you actually part of a conversation that helps build your relationship? Are you reaching out to your families at the beginning of the school year, mid-school year, end of school year, to keep them updated, even when nothing really of any kind of significance is happening? So often as a parent, the only time I get a phone call is when someone is either very sick or has done something not so good. So being able to have that open line of communication throughout the year just to check in and say, hey, things are going well on this side. Is anything coming home that I should know about? Again, along with that trusting relationship, we really want to keep in mind that asset-based. So before you make that phone call, before you write that email, really think about all the strengths of the student, of the family, of their participation in your school community before you start typing up that response. The second factor that can impact family engagement is the ability to connect to student learning in some ways. One example we have of that is a school that was rolling out a new math program and the students were really struggling. So parents were calling in and emailing the teacher for help. The school set up an opportunity for the parents to come in early in the morning, learn the math, play with some of the math games so that they could transfer these skills in the afternoons and evenings with their own children. What happened was an opportunity for social interaction as well as learning the math that was being rolled out that year. And once the math curriculum was pretty well established, the parents were still meeting once a week to start talking about topics at school, to learn about each other, and to really create some of that community feel. So that one math opportunity turned into a much bigger family movement that really helped support that school. That's an opportunity that used math as that connection to student learning. But we also want to think about the connection to student learning of social emotional skills. So are your parents aware of the skills that you're working on? And what are those engagement opportunities where parents can come and help reinforce those skills with their students? For example, if you have a game night at school for families to come and participate together, and you really emphasize the skills that you're going to be working on or the skills that you're transferring from the classroom into that game night situation so that parents can help reinforce those skills. That fun activity also has that element of student learning already integrated within. All right, so you're going to go back up to your boards in some way. You can do it at your tables or on chart paper. Your facilitator will let you choose. I really want you to start thinking about what you've done in the past. So what are those family engagement strategies you've tried? Did they work? Did they not work? Are they worth bringing back? Do they just need a little tweaking? Start having a really good conversation. And some things you're going to rely on some of your veterans for. We did this 5 years ago. It worked really well. We stopped because of funding. Really make that complete list of all of the things that you've tried in the past 5 to 7 years to see if you can figure out, are there any similarities between the things that worked and what could we bring back and what do we definitely need to keep? Start having that reflection conversation with each other. All right, so I hope we're jumping into the strategy section and you already have some things that you know you're going to either keep doing or start looking at to reinstitute. Here are some of the strategies that we are seeing successful SEL schools really put into place with their families. The first example we have for you is newsletters. So many classrooms send out a newsletter to their parents with just the information for the week or the month. Schools send out newsletters. So we're going to ask you, is there ever an SEL focus? Is there ever an SEL piece on that newsletter? Is there an opportunity for parents to communicate back? Remember, trusting relationships, there has to be two-way communication. So is there something on that newsletter that parents can respond to in some way so that you can open those lines of communication? As you think about those newsletters, keep in mind that if you have student input as you write the newsletter and students actually help you write pieces or submit artwork or do parts of the newsletter, you really increase the chances that parents are going to read it and pay attention to it. So anytime you have kids actually create or have input to that newsletter, chances are somebody is going to read it on the other end. We're looking at handouts for our parents. Are there tips, suggestions that you can give to parents so they can support some of this social emotional development at home? So let's say that we're working on delayed gratification in the classroom. We may write on that tip sheet for parents, are there some ways you can have some delayed gratification at home and really make it intentional, using that language to support what we're working on in the classroom as well as at home? So can kids have to do some chores before they earn their screen time for the evening? Do they do something to actually earn their allowance or get their allowance later? Think about ways that we can put off those great experiences rather than experiencing them all at once. I often think about binging Netflix as opposed to really setting aside and savoring an episode after an episode and starting to have those conversations with students about savoring and delaying some of that gratification. We want to look at that two-way communication again. Remember that trusting relationships. What can that look like other than emails? So one teacher that I know actually uses two-way journals. So every week she sends home a little note in a student's journal for the parents to read, and the parents write back. The student can jump in as well, and this journal goes back and forth throughout the year. Now I realize that may not work at a high school level if you have 120 to 150 students, but really think about those situations where I can use a two-way journal and have some of that communication with my parents so that I can tell them what I'm thinking and they can tell me what they're thinking and what they've been noticing at home so that we really can create such a good community feel for that student. Another example that kind of goes along with this idea that I've seen recently is called a parent hotline, in which teachers actually give students a question that they want the kids to go home and talk about with their families. So it can be a dinner table conversation, or if you're like me, it can be in the car on the way to one sporting activity or another. But that conversation happens in which my kids actually ask the question and we have a good conversation. Now the last part is I either have to send some sort of communication back to the teacher, either write a little post-it or give a little email to let them know that yes, we did have that conversation about that question and this is what came up. That helps parents open the door to some of those social emotional conversations that they may not have initiated on their own. So you're giving them that leg up. You can hook it to content if you want as well. Even the fact that families are encouraged to have discussion, whether it be about specific content or SEL, helps really build that ability to communicate, which is an SEL developmental skill as well. One strategy that we've seen work wonders with so many schools is the idea of a student-led parent conference. So one of the main complaints we get from many schools is that parents don't show up on conference night or open house night or events such as that. However, when we have a student who actually creates a PowerPoint about themselves, about their strengths, about their weaknesses, about the goals that they want to have for the school year, and they actually present their conference to their parents as well as their teacher, we seem to notice an increase in attendance at these events. If you want parents to attend, have the kids do something. Even if you're looking at just that general open house night, bring out that chorus, let the kids do some sort of performance, and then go into your open house activities. You should see so many more parents buying in and then starting that conversation with teachers because they're just there to see their students at the beginning. Let's take a look at our report cards. Are we just grading students on content alone? Are we still using things like student is a pleasure to have in class, or are we setting some SEL goals so that parents can actually see the things that we've been working on and how a student is progressing and what areas they can help support students as they work through this SEL journey? So some of the districts and schools that we're working with are looking at the idea of parent workshops to give parents a basis of the language and the knowledge and the skills in social emotional learning. You can take it a step further and actually have parents and children work together in these workshops. Are there activities that a caregiver and a student could do together to help build their relationship as they learn and practice these skills? We have an entire packet of items that you can review, modify, change, edit, use as best fits your school environment as you really start to think about how you want to engage families this year and every coming year. There are 3 areas I'm going to ask you to focus on as you really look at this work. We are looking at school-wide systems and practices. So what does your school do to really encourage family engagement? I'm thinking about something as simple as when I enter a school building and I'm greeted by the person at the front desk and they know my name and they know who my student is. Boy, that is a feeling of building a village and community, isn't it? The second one I'd like you to focus on is classroom practices and structures. There's usually such a difference from year to year as you learn your child's teacher in terms of what the expectations are. Take a look at the consistency across grade levels, across classrooms, to see if some of that family engagement structure is consistent. So for example, are parents allowed to attend a party in this class but not allowed to attend in this class? Do we get a newsletter from this teacher? This teacher only communicates by email. What is that consistency level, and does it really increase family engagement for that family throughout their time in your building? The third one I'm going to ask you about is really personal reflection. As an individual educator, administrator, para, adult, anybody who's working with students in that building, what are your individual relationships like with those parents and caregivers? Do you reach out before the school year starts? Do you check in throughout the year? Do you send that note home just talking about that student's progress? What are those individual relationships like? Can I reflect on what I did in the past and bump it up a little this year to really encourage that two-way communication with those families? So my friends, we're taking a look at our closure for today, and hopefully you're going to get some time to really sit down as a school community and do some planning so that you're really looking at, okay, these are the things we're doing as a school, these are things that every class is going to think about, and these are the things we're going to do individually, and really start to outline that plan for systemic family engagement change. But for our closure, I'm going to encourage you to take the perspective of parents for a moment. So put yourself in any parent's shoes, any caregiver's shoes that may be walking into your building every day. And I'd like you to look at these 3 questions and see what you think the answer would be for that parent. Question number 1, do you feel welcome at your child's school? So would every parent that you come into contact with in your building say, yes, I feel welcome when I walk in that door and when I walk down that hallway or I walk into that classroom, at appropriate times, of course. 2, do you feel comfortable talking with your child's teacher, with the child's principal, with the support staff, with anybody regarding your child's progress? And number 3, do you feel respected by the faculty and staff at your child's school? So many of our parents do not have the same background that you may have had. Many of them may have not had positive experiences going through school, and we don't want to reinforce that and instead change that frame of reference that they have about education. And really think about, what would the answer to that be? Do they feel respected every time I reach out to them about their student, whether it be positive or negative? So as you look at your communication this year, I'm going to ask you to write down these 3 questions. I want you to keep them someplace before you write that email, before you make that plan for increased family engagement at a social activity. Really think about the answer to those 3 things. Do our parents feel welcome? Do they feel comfortable? And do they feel respected with every communication that we have? If it takes a village to raise these kids the way that we want to raise them, keeping these 3 questions in mind will help make sure that we do create and support that village. Thank you so much for your participation today. You should receive a little packet of resources about family engagement. We look forward to working with you again soon.